We are back on Taking Care of Business on Kern Radio, News Talk, 1180, 1230 KGEO, and 1410 KERI. Clay, we're going to take a little bit of a shift here in guests.
We are?
I'm
where are we going?
The questions get tougher, Clay.
What gear are we in?
I'm really looking forward to this gentleman. Our next guest is a first district supervisor candidate in Kern County, a former pilot, Navy pilot, and former commanding officer of the China Lakes Weapons Center. Yep. Mick Gleason. Mick, welcome to Taking Care of Business.
Nice to be here. Thank you very much.
So you're a career military guy.
27 years. They had to pry me out of there because I just loved being in the Navy. I loved being around those people. I loved what we were doing. I loved the leadership. I loved everything about that organization. And let me go one step further. Today, you can be so proud of anybody you see in the Navy, and anytime you see someone in a uniform, you need to go up to them, you need to shake their hand, you need to look them eyeball to eyeball, say something nice, and I guarantee you will be better for that meeting.
There's no question about it when you consider who their boss is.
Their bosses are incredible.
Yes.
I mean the overall boss.
He means the commander-in-chief.
Yeah, I understand. But the Navy as an organization is a wonderful place. Strongly recommended to everybody. A great way to earn your citizenship.
You know, I tried to talk to my grandson. He's in the ROTC at Fresno State, and he wants to go in the Army and infantry.
What?
I think he's played too many. He's played too many games on the computer.
Send him over. I'll take care of him.
You got a deal.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
You know, Clay, I've got to tell you, this is the closest I've ever sat to a commanding officer. Man, when I was in the Marines, they usually had me on the other side of the
what
base for some reason.
What about the court martial?
Those scars are still there. I can see those.
When you were court martialed, wasn't there a
Which time? And you were in the Army, so that's nowhere near the Navy.
I was.
That's right. So, Clay.
No, Mick.
I know, but did you have a question you were going to ask him right out of the chute?
No.
You didn't? Okay,
No, I
so
just woke up.
Well, that's true. That's true. He usually sleeps through the first segment. So you were a fighter pilot in the...
I was an attack pilot. I flew A6s, which is a twin-engine jet, carries the ordnance, and it's different from a fighter pilot. Fighter pilots typically, to the layman, they're the same thing.
Okay, what's the difference?
The difference is, fighter pilots make movies. Attack pilots make history.
Oh, I like that.
Excuse me. That's it. Then all of a sudden, that's when Top Gun came out. The movie Top Gun came out. Because we were always competing. F-14 guy against A6 guys. And so then all of a sudden, Flight of the Intruder came out, which is an A6 movie.
Right.
And the saying changed. It went to to fighter pilots make movies, attack pilots make bad movies.
Okay.
That's a little like, I remember a friend of mine not too long ago asking me, what happens in the Marines when you call your rifle a gun? I said, you really don't want to know. You don't want to know.
Yeah, I flew A6s, did that for a whole bunch of years, flew a bunch of other types of planes, mostly on and off aircraft carriers throughout the world.
And you did this in Iraq, right?
Yeah, I was in Desert Storm, first strike in Desert Storm, 4 o'clock in the morning. There we were, hot and heavy, flying in. It was an interesting flight, interesting day.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So, Marty, you invited Mick here for a different reason, though, other than his history as a pilot.
But we're going to talk a little bit about his background first before we get into the supervisor's race.
Oh, he's running for supervisor.
Yes, he is. But I think this gentleman has one word that keeps on popping up whenever I have a conversation about you, and that word is leadership.
Right.
And I think a lot of that has to do with your background. Being a CEO of China Lake. I mean, that's a pretty impressive resume.
Right. If you think about it, then you don't succeed in the Navy. One of the reasons the Navy is such a great organization is because they breed leaders. It doesn't matter if you're turning a wrench, or you're cooking a pancake, or you're flying a jet, or you're doing yeoman's work. Doesn't matter. You have to be a leader. If you're not a leader, you don't make it in the Navy. Mm-hmm. The Navy breeds, teaches, and builds leaders, and they built me. 27 years worth of leadership experience. If you take the base, commanding officer of North China Lake, and you take that base and you move that on its side, it matches up pretty good with District 1.
Yes, it does.
Actually, in terms of responsibilities, in terms of public works, medical facilities, infrastructure, roads, retail, all the kind of things that District 1 is involved in. Same thing, I have that experience leading that organization in the Navy.
I was curious, thinking, I spent most of my time on naval bases. I was in Jacksonville, Florida.
Oh, great.
I was in Millington, Tennessee.
Yeah.
And the structure, the military structure, and how impressive it is when you look at the CEO and how he just, holds on to that structure.
Right.
how's it going to be for you if you're elected to try to deal with that in Bakersfield? Because a lot of these people are not adults.
Right. I hear you.
You're dealing with a different breed.
Yeah,
of cat.
it is a different format, but leadership is leadership nonetheless. Doesn't matter what formula you use it in. Leadership is about having a vision. First of all, leadership is having a moral rudder. Without a moral rudder, first and foremost, you can't go anywhere as a leader. You will not succeed because nobody's going to trust you. Nobody's going to bring that allegiance to your words or your visions unless they can identify with you as a person first. So once you have built that confidence in you as a person, then the second thing is having a vision and being able to communicate that vision and motivating the people who you want to make sure they understand your vision and are willing to go the extra mile to achieve that vision. And that doesn't matter if you're a military man or a civilian man. That doesn't matter if you're trying to influence the decisions in the minds of 7,000 people or 4 other people. It's the same type of format. You need the rudder, you need to trust, you need to develop the trust, you need to have the vision, you need to be able to communicate those ideals to the people you're working with.
Our in-studio guest is Mick Gleason, 1st District Supervisor candidate.
Mick, I want to ask you a personal question,
Sure.
and I don't know if you want to answer it or not, but what's your feeling on the don't ask, don't tell situation in the military?
Well, I actually, it worked. Whatever you have to say about it, don't ask, don't tell, worked. I know from my personal experience that being in the military, I was not, didn't have the opportunity to form an opinion about it. I just did what I was told to do by the commander-in-chief. Don't ask, don't tell. It worked. Homosexuals performed as well as other people performed, and as long as they weren't wearing it on their sleeves or putting it in front of your face on a constant basis, it didn't really offend anybody. It didn't really bother anybody. We allowed them to perform, and they performed magnificently, just like others would. It was not a factor. It was only when the person started to demonstrate that behavior that it began to affect morale and impact the performance of the unit.
Now, would you allow your personal feelings to interfere with how you vote on something if you're elected to the 1st District?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, of course I have. I think that I'm a person. I have opinions. I have absolutes that I believe in, and that those absolutes will not be compromised. But at the same time, other than those absolutes, I'd be willing to, once we get out of that region, we can start talking and negotiating, compromising, and finding solutions, which is what I think we need to do. But I do have absolutes, and I would bring those to the table.
But you need to vote based on what your constituents want you to vote, how your constituents want you to vote.
Right. I need to represent the people that I'm paid to represent, and I will do that as best I can.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
So would you say that's really a trust issue? In other words, being able to know that you would vote the way your constituents
Yeah, people are going to vote for me because of what I say, and spending a year on the road and banging on doors and shaking hands and debates and forums and all these hundreds of events I go to. So people get to know me, and they understand, and I've been thoroughly vetted to this point. Through the primary, and I'm sure I'm going to get vetted again through the general, and they're just going to get what they get, and I'm going to give them the best shot I can at bringing my person, my ideas, my opinions, and my leadership to the table.
You had a pretty big success in the primary.
Yeah. I thought that was really, really, what was interesting about that is we jumped out to an early lead, pretty significant early lead, and then it seemed to broaden. So I think it was bigger. It grew from 26% to 30%, which showed me that the votes were from a broad array. It just wasn't focused on Ridgecrest, although Ridgecrest did come in big. It also showed that I was winning in other precincts as well, like Shafter and Bakersfield and Delano.
Well, we'll come back and talk about that in a minute, but sure. I also want to bring up the fact that your Roy, your competitor, never lost a race, number one, and he was in this exact same situation in his last race for Supervisor.
Well, I agree with half that, and I disagree with the other half. The first half I agree with is that I've met Roy when the race began. I first met him when the race began, and I've discovered him to be a hardworking, dedicated, professional campaigner, and he's tenacious, and he's going to work hard. So my hands are full. The second half that I disagree with is he's not been in this boat before because he's not faced me before.
Ooh, I like that. I like that a lot. We'll be back in a moment on Taking Care of Business on Kern Radio News Talk 1180, 1230 KGEO, and 1410 KERI.